All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for tuning in for another week. Everybody want to say hello? I got us up here in Brady Bunch mode here. So.
Okay,
Well,
sorry, I'm just adjusting the volume. All right.
I'll say hi. I'll say hi real quick. I'm Tanya Zeppetto, licensed mental health counselor.
Hey, and I'm Jennifer Young, also a licensed mental health counselor.
Awesome. So I just want to say thank you to both of you guys for joining us today. Many people in the system probably know who you are. We have relied on both of your expertise for a long time now in terms of figuring out what we do to try to help keep ourselves healthy and safe as we go through this often difficult job. And so thank you for all of that, but also for agreeing to join us today, because I think there couldn't be a more appropriate time to just take a second and talk about the struggles that are associated with not only the work that we're doing, but just living under the conditions of this pandemic right now. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and give our normal quick update on where we are in the state of things. And then after that, we will get into hopefully some good advice and expertise from the both of you. We are able to take questions as well. So those of you who are watching, please start to think about what you might want to ask these two mental health professionals. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and put up my screen. And so here is our current curve. As you can see, we've largely seemed to be coming down the backside of this particular spike. We continue to have a decrease in daily case counts, a decrease in percent positivity, and generally a slight increase in hospital bed availability. I will tell you that there's still a significant number of folks in the hospital in Pinellas County with COVID. So, you know, we have something in the neighborhood of, let's see, 170 folks that are in the hospital with COVID on regular floor beds, and another 60 something folks that are in the ICU with COVID, and half of those 60 are on the ventilator right now. So we do continue to have a significant number of people who are currently ill, some of whom are very ill and fighting for their lives here in Pinellas, even though we see that the overall numbers in the community tend to be trending down and heading in the direction we'd like. We're nowhere close to where we were 2 months ago. So now is not the time to take our foot off the gas or to let up on our efforts to contain this virus. I think that all of the things that our community has been doing, whether it's wearing masks, staying apart, you know, physically distancing, changing behaviors, whether it's not going to the restaurant or the big gathering or whatever it is, I think all of those have some contribution here. I don't think we can say that one of them is overall the magic bullet. But I would just say thank you for, you know, all the work that you all have done to keep yourselves safe, both when you're taking care of patients as well as when you're in the stations or on the units with your coworkers, and also for the things you've done off duty to try and keep your family safe and to keep yourself safe and available to the community as a resource. I know it's frustrating that we don't have a clear end in sight, and that we might not know when that clear end is going to be for a while. But that's all the more reason why it's probably a good idea to pause for a second today and just talk about some of the things that I know I'm feeling. I highly suspect that everybody else is feeling. And those emotions and those feelings range broadly on a daily basis. Sometimes there's happiness that we're being effective, and sometimes there's, you know, utter sadness. I heard on a call I was on just before this that there was a 42-year-old healthy firefighter in Los Angeles who just died from COVID. And on the same call, I heard there was a 51-year-old healthy firefighter in Ohio that died for COVID. No underlying illnesses, no reason why they should have had a particularly severe course. And yet that's what happened. And so this thing is a roller coaster. And I know I'm experiencing that, and I think other people must be as well. So with that, maybe I'll ask Jennifer or Tanya to give us their perspective, at least just from a 10,000 foot view of what's going on in the mental health of our community as we go through this.
I'll start.
Yeah, go ahead, Tanya.
Yeah. Most of the time when we see someone, it's because they've already got to the point where they've figured that they need some help dealing with what they're dealing with. So a lot of times people have already tried a bunch of things before they call a therapist. So what we see typically is, all of my usual coping mechanisms are not available to me right now. Can't go on vacation. I can't see my friends. I can't do this. I can't do that. And so a lot of times what I'm seeing is people talking about irritability, people talking about becoming defensive easily, maybe some upset in their marriage, coming in talking about marital issues, sometimes sleeplessness or changes in their sleep, and maybe reduced productivity or making mistakes at work. So by the time I see them, usually it's already at a point where they've tried some things and they feel like it's deteriorating or it's not getting better. And this is what they report when they come in. So that's what I'm seeing currently.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with Tanya on all of those. I think also there's a lot of sadness that I, particularly as a clinician, didn't really expect people to be sad, and as depression, sure, but just a general sadness and grief. I can't do this with my family. I didn't get to be there for that event with the family. And maybe even people aren't identifying that as grief, but that's what it is. They're grieving that they weren't able to do the things with their family and loved ones that they would normally get to do. And so when you lose that connection with people you love, there's some grief that comes up. And I also think there's a sense of insecurity or a lack of sense of safety because we don't know what the disease is going to do. We don't know who it's going to attack, like you just articulated, the 41-year-old and the 52-year-old, you wouldn't expect it to take their lives. So there's a lot of that going on of, I don't know. And the information, we haven't always had good, reliable information in a lot of ways, or people are getting their information from different sources, and that, throws people off. I know in the medical field, one of the nurses that I spoke with, she articulated that most of the time as a nurse, you know what to expect from certain diseases or people that you treat. Certainly if you've been on a, med surg floor for a while, you know what to expect. And then when you're dealing with patients and you don't know what's going to happen, you're learning with everyone else along the way. There's a loss of sense of safety and security happening that you take home with you oftentimes. So I think there's that instability deep down that's impactful to folks as well. Yeah.
I have a couple of specific, like for instances or things that I've noticed feeling, or situations that I've noticed were somewhat troublesome to me as we've gone through this. And I wonder if you both might just comment on, if there's something, a perspective on that situation or a strategy for coping kind of thing. So I think situation number one was the uncertainty that you just talked about, and not knowing sort of when this is going to end or how it's going to go, or is it going to, is it going to be a problem for my 80-something-year-old dad, or is it going to be a problem for my, 40-something-year-old friend, or what is it, any strategies for dealing with that level of uncertainty and just overall general angst about where things are going?
I'll start with this one, Tanya. Kind of along the same lines too. It has been brought to my attention that what the changes in how medics and EMTs and other medical professionals how to interact is kind of like when there's a hurricane and everybody's got to work extra hard and stay on extra hours, and it lasts for a week, maybe 2, depending on the cleanup efforts, and then it's over. And so as hard it is when you're going through it, you can kind of see the end. And so this is very, very different. And I again, just want to say that that's definitely part of the issue. What I think is important here is kind of being able to stay present and mindful, which, it sounds like a small little thing, but it's really important to know what you can count on and predict each day and each moment. So literally, one of the thinking strategies I often ask folks to do is, what do I know for sure? What I know for sure today is I'm going to have food on the table. I'm going to go to work today. My family's safe today. Just kind of focusing on, from a thinking perspective, what you know for sure today, maybe head out a few days ahead, maybe a week. What I know for sure this week is, this is what I can predict. And resist that tendency to want to figure out what might happen next month or in 3 months. So really focusing in on what you know for sure today, this week, these next few days, and turning your mind, to come back to that thinking, resisting that future focus, I think really helps.
I agree with that. And I would also add, making to-do lists that are actually things that you can accomplish today.
Yep.
Not crazy stuff, but really things that you can accomplish today. And then going over your list at the end of the day, like, here's what I did, here's what I can do, maybe making lists of things that you worry about that you can't do anything about, and then set that list aside with a very clear that that's not something that I can fix right now. But I think acknowledging that, what you're feeling, making sure that you're acknowledging it, that you're, like Jennifer said, the mindfulness of actually being aware of what you are feeling, what's happening, being able to talk about it, write about it, make your lists, take some kind of action, based on what you're feeling.
And what's hard too is, I think feelings are valid, but they're not always useful. So, right. So, yeah.
True.
So like when,
so true.
Yeah. Right. So you definitely want to validate that you're afraid of what the future is going to bring, or that you're unsure, or that you're pissed off or mad about it. There's validity in that. It's just, what good is that emotion going to do for you? And when you start to realize that you're having the thoughts associated with that are, what am I going to do 6 months from now? What am I going to do 3 months from now? And the obvious answer is, I don't know, because we don't know what's coming. So turning your attention then to, okay, this day I have control, this 3 days I have control. Now you're shifting that focus into things you do have control over, to decrease the fear that is completely useless, not helping you. I say useless. It is useless. Like, fear of the future doesn't help us. It makes sense. It's important to acknowledge it, but it's just not going to help you. So go ahead.
No, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I always kind of teach people about the amygdala, and, you're kind of getting that part of your brain activated that is sensing danger. And when you're sitting in your living room and there's no real danger, you got to tell your amygdala to kind of take a seat. So, being able to breathe and get present, can kind of help with that, as opposed to letting those thoughts run away 6 months, 3 months down the road.
That makes a ton of sense. Focus on the things that you can control, let go of the things that you can't. Start with the little things like making your bed in the morning, right?
Yeah.
It's that same kind of analogy, I guess.
Yeah, one step at a time.
Yeah. And you have to be intentional. I mean, I know it sounds easy to say, like, oh, I'm just going to, make my bed in the morning. Oh, that's really going to help my mental health. Well, yeah, it kind of is. And I think people minimize the reality of that yes, when you can just focus on making your bed, when you can just focus on cooking dinner that night, you literally are changing the way your brain is working, which is going to decrease those fearful thoughts. So.
That sounds like a great strategy.
Those are the things that remain normal right now. Being home, making your bed, having dinner.
The routines are very important right now for people. And I know that it's been hard for people to establish new routines because the routine isn't the same as it used to. But but the routine is important, knowing that you have things to do, and that you are following through with those things is extremely important for our mental health. Productivity is important for our mental health. So, and something is as simple as making your bed. Check. Did it.
Yeah. And I agree with what you said too about how hard it is to create a new routine based on this current situation, because things are so challenging. I think being at home, as much as we all joked in the beginning, oh, it's going to be fun and I'm going to get this done and that done, there are a lot of challenges that are at home that we enjoy going to work to get away from those challenges, and we may not see it that way. And so there's, making a new routine and creating all that is so hard, but it is important. It's again, it's like, what can I actually control? I can control my schedule. I can make sure I get these things done and complete these tasks and focus on the things that I need to focus on.
Awesome. That reminds me of a meme I saw when the schools first let out. It said millions of American parents just figured out the teacher wasn't the problem.
I love that one.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's actually, two comments here. One, well, here's an interesting one. Somebody in the comments, Chief Jameson, quoted something that sounds familiar to me that said, "God grant me the serenity." I remember in medical school where we had to go and attend some AA meetings as part of our psychiatry rotation and learning about use disorders. That was the prayer that AA uses in terms of, I think it says something about, understanding what I can't control and the grace to accept when I can't control things. And that's right. Probably a really applicable scenario here where the whole world is feeling like, we can't control this.
Yeah. I feel like that applies to the PPE issue that we hear about a lot. I don't want to wear the PPE. I'm tired of the PPE. How much longer are we gonna have to wear the PPE? It's like, you can't really control that. Somebody else, I always say jokingly, someone smarter than you has to make that decision. So, you can't control that. So you just got to wear the PPE, and how you manage that and what you need to do to get through that's, part of your work. But, you can't control so much.
Yeah. And since you brought that up, let's talk about that for a minute, about because Dr. Jameson had mentioned it before we started, about anxiety on having something on your face for a long period of time, that sort of thing. Right now I'm talking to my clients about grounding techniques. One of my favorites is object naming, where you literally just look around and name things that you can see around you: lamp, computer, phone, glass of water, like that. It sounds really silly, but what that does is it actually short circuits the part of your brain that's trying to do anxiety about what's on your face right now, and engages a different part of your brain altogether, which is like, what is that thing right there? It's a lamp. It's a totally different part of your brain. So doing that for a while, the breathing exercises can be good when you're not wearing PPE for relaxation and for meditation. Breathing is always great. What some people are finding is that if they have something on their face and they try to do breathing exercises, they're just that much more aware of the fact that they have something on their face. So other kinds of grounding exercises usually work better in that situation. Grabbing hold of the chair that you're sitting in and really feeling the texture, and paying attention to that, paying attention to the rise and fall of your chest when you breathe, rather than, the air going in and out of your mouth, that sort of thing, and nose, that sort of thing.
Really good point, Tanya, on the, we push a lot of the relaxation breathing, but when you're in PPE, that is like almost the last thing. But the grounding is perfect. I think about the five senses. Anything you do with any of your five senses is going to ground you. So I love the object identification. I use colors with people, like, my color's blue. So I just look around and I look for all the things in the room that are blue, or I look for circles. Touch is really good. Some folks that are having issues with PPE should carry around a little smooth stone with them, or a little rough nail file, something that has some texture to it, so they can distract themselves with that touch. You can keep it in your pocket, and most of the time, no one will realize you're fiddling in your pocket. But, anything you can do with any of your senses to keep your focus off of the sensation of having that PPE on. And again, like Tanya said, it just changes the way your brain works and tends to override it. And the more you do this stuff, again, initially, we're not talking about, oh, it's going to make it all better, right away. But it literally is retraining your brain. It's teaching your brain that this is okay, and let's focus over here. So you just have to keep exercising those muscles in your brain.
Yeah, you're going to kind of stink at it at first, but after a while, you'll get better at it.
Yeah. I think about too, like having a few seconds of relief is the goal. Like the first couple times you get 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 3 minutes of feeling better, and you keep doing it. And then the following weeks you get 5 or 10 minutes of relief. So the more you do it over time, the more relief you'll get from the anxiety feelings.
I think those are very, very helpful tips for not only our crews that are wearing the PPE all the time, but we're putting PPE on our patients. And that can be really stressful. And they also have, children and family members at home that probably are needing to wear masks to get out of the house. So thank you for that. That's going to be helpful all around.
Good point.
Yeah.
Is that the same concept as what some people I think refer to in meditation as finding your home base? Is that the same concept or is that different? I'm not sure.
It's different. Like a lot of people with meditation, they have a sort of like a safe place, which might be a visualization for them of a place that they've been before, or a place that they can imagine being that's like a safe physical place to be. But it's also a state of it's a state of awareness of what's going on in your body. It's a state of
like being at a homeostasis, like a settled, you are at your most calm, most relaxed. And a lot of people use that visualization to get themselves there. They remember being out on the boat and they use all of their senses to kind of get back to that place. And then when they're there, their home base is, I'm settled, I'm calm, and I can just stay here, through visualization and being calm.
This seems much more granular. Like this is a specific thing I'm doing to distract my mind right now, as opposed to trying to be able to achieve some kind of state.
We actually had someone in the comments that said something about that you should always have a happy space or place.
Yeah. And I think that's good. Like when you're not on a call and you're hanging out in the truck, you're hanging out at the station, doing the visualizations and finding your happy place, that is the time to work on that. I think in the field, when you're on the way to a call, don't go to your happy place. We need you to go to the call.
Stay here with us.
Yes, stay here.
Focus.
But you can do the grounding. You can do the sensation on your way to the call, for sure. That's that quick in the moment. And the other thing is medical professionals, when you realize what you're doing and you're doing it well, meaning medical professionals already are very good at being present. They're just not realizing that that's a skill they can use to feel better when they're not on a call. So making that connection that when you're working with a patient, you are mindful. Your body is going through the motions. Generally, people report that they are calm and they're doing what they need to do. Step 1, step 2, step 3. That is a sense of focus and calmness that we would want you to have all the time. So you have the ability to do it. What we're telling you is when you're not on a call, think about step 1, step 2, step 3, breathe, do the grounding, go to your happy place. Like you can do the same thing when you're not on a call. You can do it because you're already doing it. You just don't realize that you're doing it.
That's so
Apply
interesting.
the skill somewhere else. Apply the skill elsewhere.
That's so interesting because I totally know what you're saying. Like sometimes I'll be out at my workstation in the ER and things will just be a zillion miles an hour coming from every direction. And it's like, almost overwhelming. And then if I end up going in a room and doing something really intense with one patient where I'm sort of really present and don't really care about all the other stuff because I'm doing some resuscitation or whatever it might be, then I actually feel better.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
That's really interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So
I have another. Oh, go ahead, Jasmine.
So we're broadcasting this to dispatchers and firefighters and paramedics all together. And actually, it's very interesting what you just mentioned. I've worked in a couple of those seats. So on a call, you do get them a second to get up and breathe, but those working in the dispatch center, they are going nonstop all day. So I do think it's important for people to stop and take a breath every once in a while and take a minute to do that, because they don't get that break to be on that specific call. They just go the whole time.
Yeah.
So
I hope they get bathroom breaks.
And well, I mean, like, just make sure when you get up that you take a minute and you ground yourself and take yourself back for a second, because they're wearing masks and they're dispatching calls and answering phones all day long, and they're a part of this team too. So
yeah,
that's
and
a great point, Jasmine.
Yeah, that's what happens with the body. You know, they're flooding with all the adrenaline to get through those calls, and when you're sustaining that, it stays jacked up, and then when you step away, your body doesn't always know to say, come on back down, it's all okay. So you, again, just have to teach your body that we don't need to stay in that adrenaline focused place anymore. So trips to the bathroom are really important.
Yeah, just take a breath and take a break when that happens. I noticed, just like we were just discussing, that the difference in spending 12 hours on an ambulance and 12 hours in a very busy, intense day in dispatch is that you get on that call and you are focused on that patient on that call, and you're like away from got another call, a bunch of radios going off and all that, but not everybody has that opportunity. So when you get a break, take some silence, take a breath, and get to your place.
Awesome.
When I was a baby therapist, I learned a doorway meditation, and it's something maybe that 911 operators can do. Is when I was seeing clients back to back, each time I would leave through my doorway to see a client out and then bring one back in, I would just do a nice, slow, measured breaths and kind of say to myself, that problem, or whatever, say something to let that client leave my office mentally and bring a new client in. So, there might be a quick way where the operators could do something like that, kind of take a deep breath in between each call just to kind of cleanse that experience and make some space for the new one.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
So I have another situation beyond just that sort of angst about not knowing where this is going and things we can't control. So the next situation that I thought was interesting is, I think for some people, probably particularly people who may themselves have an underlying condition or may have somebody in their home who's in one of the more at-risk groups. I think for some people, there's an actual fear or gut check for going and putting on their PPE and going and taking care of a known positive COVID patient. And I think by this point, probably most of us are used to that, and it's not such a big deal at this point. And we probably have a little bit more trust in our PPE and our ability for it to protect us than maybe we did at the beginning. But is there any particular strategy for coping with either the potential fear of yourself getting COVID or of bringing it home to your family or somebody you love?
I'd like to start with, I think the first thing is it's normal to feel that way, and to validate that for yourself, that it's okay to feel that way. It's normal to feel that way. Lots of people are feeling that way when they put that PPE on and go in to work with a known positive patient. And I can feel that way and still do what I'm here to do. Literally, and it's just like Jennifer was saying, you already have the skills for focusing in on what you need to do. And, maybe it's adding, something to that, to be like, what, I can be anxious, I can be afraid, and also walk in there and do my job. So it's not about like pushing that feeling aside or burying that feeling or pretending that it's not there even, but it's the and I can feel this and do my job.
Yeah, I think it's the acceptance that that's the reality of the situation that you're in, is having to face that dangerous thing. I also think a lot about, knowing that no matter what happens, you can cope with it, that you will find a way through it, that you will always make sure you and your loved one get the best care possible. This is a scary thing, I'm going to say it out loud, but there are no guarantees in life with anything. COVID is no different in that way. There are a lot of diseases and things that happen to folks that we don't have control of the outcome. So in some ways, COVID is no different than those things. So knowing that the worst thing that can happen, you can cope with it. It doesn't mean it's going to be good or okay or whatever, but knowing that you can get through it, you can cope with it, kind of reinforcing that idea. And you will.
Yeah. Because
yeah.
you do, because that's what you do.
Yeah.
But also like having a plan, and it's not to obsess about it or to obsessively sit around with your loved ones at home talking about the plan. But what is the plan? If you come home, you know, and find out that you've been exposed or that you tested like, do you have a plan? So having a plan can actually lower your anxiety about that just a little bit. And also talking to your coworkers openly about this stuff is scary. This is how I felt going, I'm losing words right now. After the call is over,
the debriefing,
debrief. Thank you. That part's important too, because everybody's probably feeling similarly, or there are at least a few people who feel similarly. And so that helps.
I think with the anxious thoughts and this fear of the future and fear of things you can't control, the idea that you have a plan in place if you get sick, if your family members get sick, and that applies across the board for any fearful thoughts. When I said before about you kind of don't want to try not to entertain too far ahead. However, if you're having those thoughts of what are we going to do about this and what am I going to do about that, take a minute and answer the question. What am I going to do if I get COVID? What am I going to do if my loved one gets COVID? Make the plan. So again, you're decreasing your brain's focus on something you can't control and turning it to something you can control. If I get COVID, this is what's going to happen. These are the things that I can control. This is the plan I will attempt to put in place. Same with my loved one. So doing all that you can to answer all the questions that your brain is forcing forward because of fear.
That makes a ton of sense.
I think in this industry, people have a hard time talking about their feelings, and especially when it comes to fears. So knowing who your peer support is within your agency, and having somebody to talk to if you need that. Also remember that on Target Solutions, we still have the mental health resources. They're right underneath all the COVID stuff on the side.
I think it's important to know, as a therapist, this may come across funny too, but I'm going to say it anyway. I don't really want to talk about your feelings. I want to talk about what's making you feel that way. So we're going to identify the feeling. We're going to validate the feeling. We're going to acknowledge the feeling. But then what is the thought that is driving that emotion? So people don't have to be afraid to talk about their feelings. We're going to talk about what's creating the feelings, so we don't have to talk about the feelings. Does that make sense?
No, that makes sense.
Yeah, we're the more practical you can be in a lot of ways, the better your mental health can be. And I'm not saying there's always going to be answers or there's always going to be solutions, but I think, again, feelings aren't facts. And so we have to focus on what's underneath the feelings. So, we've got to get to what's underneath and solve the problems that are there.
Super insightful. Wow. Yeah. I love it.
I know everybody's afraid of feelings. So I'm like, well, how about this angle? We don't talk about your feelings. We'll solve your problems. How about that?
No, that's actually that's brilliant, I think, for the type of people that are in first response type roles that, not only having a discrete plan for what you would do in a situation, I think we're used to confronting potentially dangerous situations routinely. But we know that if there's, God forbid, a line of duty death or somebody gets hurt, we know that we have, disability insurance, life insurance. We know that our community will rally around and take care of our family.
Yeah, of course.
But in this situation, it's so much more nebulous. What will happen? Will it be minor? Will it be major? Will I have long-term problems? Where will I go if I'm told I was exposed and need to quarantine? I mean, something as simple as that. Who's going to take care of my dog while I do that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
That just makes all the sense in the world that solidifying those things beforehand is no different from, buying that insurance policy when you start a family. So it just makes all the sense in the world. I love it. That's fantastic.
And I think sometimes the feelings do get overwhelming. And a lot of times our brain jumps right to the emotion and we skip over what's underlying it. And then the emotions get cranked up from all these thoughts and questions we can't answer. And so people do get this feeling, this overwhelming negative feeling, and don't realize, well, let's just pull back and untangle and see what's underneath that. Because the feelings tend to overwhelm us. And then they get scared we're going to talk about their feelings. So, know that there's something underneath driving those feelings, and it could be very practical stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Very simple stuff.
I think even having those feelings is hard sometimes in this population. We have a young, healthy population here a lot, and we are having a lot of people that are needing to be tested because they were close to or may have had an exposure. So that fear is something that young, healthy people don't really tend to have, especially when they're in this line of work where people are pretty tough.
And I think too, the thought that it's going to happen to your loved one, the calls that folks run and have to deal with, of course, there are calls that, kind of get to you because they seem personal. But I feel with COVID, it's a little bit, that has been cranked up a little bit. Like my family member could actually get this, or I do know someone that's gotten it. It feels like it's more intensely close to home. And that's, not a good feeling to have that fear that it's going to come home and that I could bring it home. That's scary.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a comment in the chat room that is worth maybe a quick explanation. And that is somebody says, goes back almost to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I was wondering if you just explain to the folks who are watching who might not have heard of that, what that is.
Yeah, I love Maslow. So if you look at it like a pyramid, you've got on the bottom, you've got your safety needs, like, having a house, having food, having general, your physical needs mostly met. On the next level is, having, and I'm going to summarize this because there are several levels, but having connection with other people, having, friendships, having love relationships, and then at the very top is self-actualization. That's where you've reached all your goals, you have all your needs met, and you're giving back, to the community, and it's all this sort of thing. But we, thank you. So we what tends to happen when we're in and a lot of people are having a response to this COVID situation that's reminiscent of the way that people respond to trauma in a general sense. Mm-hmm. And what it tends to do is knock us back down to, oh no, like before I was at my esteem needs, my, feeling accomplished at work and my relationship was going well and life was pretty good. And now I'm knocked down to thinking about just safety, which is lower on the, and so anytime that happens that you're like, oh, now I'm knocked down to, your house burns down and all of a sudden you're on the very first basic physiological, you don't have a house to live in. So all the other things, your relationships, your self-esteem, your, the things that you do sometimes for self-care, sometimes that stuff can just feel like it's not even real, or you might be having problems in those areas because you got knocked down to the level of, now I have to worry about this basic thing right here. And that can be very worrisome for people. It feels unsafe.
It's a really good articulation of why folks may be having a harder time with this than what they realize or what they expected. It's because this has shaken your basic needs and your sense of safety. Mm-hmm. And so as a result, everything above that gets thrown off kilter. It's just feels like the way, you feel like you're on shaky ground, when before all of this, my relationships were good. I was self-actualized, all of this. And then all of a sudden, and again, I've talked to a couple of medics about how that happens during hurricanes, like for that week when you are, especially with the recent bad one we had here 2 years ago, that really threw folks for a loop because it was so impactful on a primary needs safety level. So many EMS folks were impacted by that. And so many other things fell by the wayside or were negatively impacted. Now we've got this for an extended period of time. You don't know where you're, and I would say even basic needs from, you may have a job because you're an EMS, but your partner has lost their job and now we don't know how the bills are going to get paid because of COVID. So, the ground that you were on 6 months ago, 8 months ago before this has definitely been shaken. So yes, relationships are going to be more challenging and who you how you feel about yourself and what you believe about yourself is going to be on shaky ground because those primary needs are being messed with.
Yeah, that's amazing, because that's a really it sounds obvious, but
Yeah.
not until you say it out loud, because what is the impact on your overall functioning when you can't get toilet paper or hand soap at the store? Like, it doesn't seem like a big deal, except it's a big deal when
that's right.
All of a sudden the shelves don't have very much food on them, which we all saw this spring, and
that's right. That's
really
right.
made people go, wait a minute, what's up with this?
Yeah. Or you can't see your family members, like, you don't know how your parents are, your grandparents are, or for divorced parents, I've have parents that haven't been able to see their own children because they've had to stay quarantined with the other parent. Like, there's been some really impactful experiences folks have had in that way.
So what we do in these emergencies when a hurricane comes, generally that's, what we're all waiting for, the big one, right? So everybody dives in and goes to work and works more and gets excited to be a part of the team that is making a difference, and they stop taking care of themselves. And in this case, what we saw in the last hurricane, it ended up taking a lot longer to get everybody back to where they needed to be, that people started kind of like having problems later on because they didn't have their needs. They didn't have clean uniforms. They didn't have, they didn't bring what they needed. They sent their kids to family, and that was for, 2 weeks of a hurricane. So this is going on and on. And we're talking about a population that just really wants to dive in and help and make the difference. So So in the hurricane over, 2 weeks, by the end of that 2 weeks, we saw people that were just hurting and finally going like, I haven't been home. I don't have power. I miss my kids. Now we're taking this and we're stretching it out over this long period of time. And I think the people that can make it through those 2 weeks that are maybe missing some of that self-care, or if we look at the pyramid, the other things as you go up, the farther you get into this, you might notice that you are struggling a little bit. So if you are, it's okay. We're all going through this together, and just make sure that you realize we have a community out here that we can all help each other.
That cliche saying about putting the oxygen mask on yourself first is directly related to this issue of being able to meet your own primary needs first. If you and the people you care about most don't have food and water, don't know how the bills are going to get paid, and don't have a sense of safety, you are going to be less effective when you are trying to help others. And if you don't see that now, you're going to see that in the future. It will catch up with you. So ensuring that you are doing what you need to care for yourself and the people you love before you get out on the road. I think that's a downside of being in this field, is so many folks want to help other people and let themselves, fall by the wayside. And that does all of us a disservice, frankly.
Yeah, I think it's not because this is not a hurricane or something that's going to end. You have to make sure you're taking care of yourself. And I think that is a struggle a lot in this community.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a good problem to have, but it's not a good problem. I mean, it's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I have one more sort of situation to pose, and then we were starting to get some questions in the chat room that I'd like to pose to you after that. So the last one I wanted to ask, and this is partly selfish on my part, is that I've read some articles about a term called moral injury, and I'm not sure if I totally understand it, but the gist of the article was, here are us healthcare workers or first responders who are working on the front line of this thing, doing our damnedest, putting ourselves and our families potentially in harm's way, trying to get this sucker under control in order to save other lives. And when we see friends, family, other folks who aren't taking it seriously or aren't following the guidelines, or are, maybe in other ways sort of not appreciating what it is that we're trying to do or experiencing as we go through this, then that seems like it can hurt sometimes. And so I guess any thoughts on that, or ways to process that, or any suggestions?
Yeah, wow, that's a big one. I think ultimately we end up coming back to what Jennifer was saying earlier, which was, refocusing on the things that you can actually do something about. If this is a loved one or a person, a good friend that you feel like you can do some education with them or share with them, this is how I feel when I see you, not following the guidelines or whatever. I feel like, whatever. if you feel like you can educate them a bit, fine, go for it. If you can't, and that's a dead end road, refocus on what you are doing, making sure that you are aligning your behavior with your value system, and try not to worry about everyone else's value system. And that is a tough one right now because we're all up in each other's business about all kinds of things and all over social media. But it's that circling back to, let me make sure that I'm aligning my behavior with my value system. And that's what I can do right now today.
Yeah, I think accepting other people's inabilities is a part of that as well, or their inability to see things your way, even when it's something as impactful as a moral issue according to you.
Right.
Unfortunately, moral issues are subjective. I wish they weren't, but they are. So, accepting that other folks have inabilities, and again, I'm using that word intentionally because if I have a moral belief and you have a different one, it's probably important for me to see that difference as you are incapable, if you will, of seeing this my way and accepting that person's limitation. So often, I agree with Tanya in that if there's a crack and you can get in and help them maybe find and join with them in a way, absolutely, we need to be doing that. However, it's important to recognize that in many cases you can't. And again, I'm using that word intentionally. There are people that you cannot change, that will not change. And so accept that and turn your focus towards things that you can control and do have control over. People have different worldviews. And that, another little thing that phrase, "it is what it is one of the most important lessons that we as adults need to, and I hate the phrase personally. I grew up with my mother saying it often. She had actually a sign, and it used to drive me crazy. But when you think about our development psychologically, it really means that we accept what this is in this moment. And that's what we're saying is it's important to accept what is happening in this moment with this person, with this experience. It is what it is. You don't have to like it. Yes, thank you. That's the other big piece. You don't have to like it. You don't have to agree with it, but it is what it is, and you can't control it. So when I was being in that space.
Thanks. Yeah, when I was reading that, it made me wonder if the fact that people look at this sometimes from a moral standpoint, as opposed to a very sort of different people have different perceptions type standpoint. Do you think that's why some of the things have become just so political and so polarized in terms of how we as a community deal with this issue? I mean, is that what's behind it?
I think some of the basic concepts that we've all believed have been challenged, like science, that science is now a moral issue. Science is science. So having that idea be questioned, I think is definitely shifted what people see and what people are choosing to do. So I think that's it. I think the moral injury part of it too is if you hold on to the idea that somebody else has to believe the way you believe, you will injure yourself, right? That's what will happen is you are causing me a moral injury because you are not doing what is morally correct. When the reality is morals are subjective. And so you are allowed and empowered and have a right in most cases to do as you please and believe as you please. So accepting that and recognizing someone else's inability to have your moral belief releases you from the possibility of being injured by someone else's morals. And again, I think basic concepts have been attacked, and that's a concern.
Yeah. So I bring it up by way of, I think we can all see that there's a lot of contentious issues and there's a lot of people with different opinions about what's right and what's wrong. Again, to use moral words. But that in some ways, I think it also contributes to the overall sense of angst or uncertainty or fear about, where we are and where things are going. So I just wanted to bring it up because when I was reading the article, it seemed like it connected back to the overall experience that we're going through in a pretty significant way.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so I'd like to relay a couple of questions from the chat and see what your guys' thoughts are. So there's one question, and by the way, for those who are watching, please go ahead and start popping all of your questions into the chat, and we'll just get through as many as we can over the next little bit. But please go ahead and start putting whatever questions or issues you want to hear about on there. So the first one is from Mark, and he says, how do you feel those who suffer from all of this COVID anxiety should be working on building resiliency? Like, for example, can they focus, I think this is what you mean, Mark, he's saying, can they focus on resilience and building that resilience in lieu of worrying about things that are outside their control?
Yeah, I think resilience is an ongoing. So I don't think it's a thing that okay, now I'm ready to focus on resilience because I have this other thing taken care of. Like, I think it's kind of an ongoing thing. But I think that, one piece of resiliency is recognizing your strengths and pulling from your strengths, looking for the positives, looking for when things are going well, looking for what safe people who are supportive, looking for ways that you can complement yourself and other people. Some of resiliency is looking for the positive things that are happening, looking for the helpers, if you will, which is something that we teach, the kids about first responders. And also part of resiliency is that self-care versus self-soothing. There's a place for self-soothing, absolutely, but self-care is more about being proactive and getting in front of it and doing the things that keep you sane. And one thing I just wanted to say really quickly is, maybe think of social distancing as more like physical distancing instead of social distancing, because we want to keep social connections as strong as we can right now. And any way that you can find to do that and also keep your physical distance is good. But I think some people are taking that a little too far. And one of them, it's like, well, if I can't hug you, then I'm going to crawl up under the covers and just not come out and join a Zoom. But the proactive part of self-care, what is self-care? Is that exercising? Is that spending time with people that you care about, even if it's over Zoom? Is it eating healthy? Is it reading? Is it hobbies? Is it, what are your self-care? And the self-soothing, which we can easily lapse into sometimes, can be sometimes unhealthy if we already wait until we're in trouble and then we're drinking or we're raging or we're, trying to find some way to feel better after the fact. Then sometimes that can get a little bit sticky and we can get into an area where we're chasing it instead of staying in front of it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love what you said too about looking for your strengths. If you've been in the field longer than a year, you're already resilient. So what helped you make it through the first year and the second year and the 10th year and the 15th year? Like, you already have that ability. So now to boost your sense of resilience or your understanding of your own resilience, what are your strengths? What has worked for you? And kind of focusing on that and re-engaging and doing that. And sometimes when you're overwhelmed or depressed or anxious, it takes a little extra work to actually see the strengths and do the things, but it's important to put that energy. That's what your resilience is about.
Definitely.
Great, thank you. Liz, I think, asks, what are some signs to look out for that you might be struggling? So I think she means in yourself.
Yeah. So I mentioned some of the things earlier when we started about what I've been seeing, what people are coming in complaining with, the complaints that they're coming in with. And people are talking about irritability, getting defensive easily. That's like a big one. Sleep changes, appetite changes, feeling hopeless, feeling like a failure, feeling overwhelmed, isolating yourself, reduced productivity, or making mistakes at work. Those are the big ones that I'm seeing right now.
Yeah, I read all of those. I think some folks are having not wanting to go to work when they used to love going to work. So recognizing that you're kind of dragging a little bit on the way in and that some of the symptoms are starting on the drive in, that's probably a sign. My other favorite psychology word, anhedonia, is a loss of pleasure from things you used to like doing. So, you used to like going out and running or playing, basketball, and now you just don't even feel like doing those things. So that's another big sign that something's going on.
Yeah.
And that by the way, let's say also that these symptoms are sustained over 2 to 3 weeks. Anybody might have a day where they don't want to go to work or they're a little irritable. But when you're starting to have these symptoms over 2 to 3 week periods kind of sustained, that's when something probably might need to be addressed. So.
And by the way, we love talking to people who have just noticed that they're having some of these things, and they're, it's okay to reach out and to talk to a professional, even if you don't think that you're in really big trouble, like you don't think that you're in a huge depression, or, things haven't unraveled to that point yet. So you don't think you need it. We love clients who just feel like they need somebody to talk to. We like
or
that.
like a checkup. I've gotten some calls from clients that I haven't seen in years, and they're like, with COVID, I just need a checkup. Cool, come in, let's do a session, and you'll be on your way for another 3 years or whatever. Like just having that awareness that I'm having these feelings and changes that really weren't like me, and I just need a little shot in the arm and keep it moving. So that is absolutely, yes, we like that. That's resilience, that you have the awareness of the changes and you get what you need and keep moving.
Mark, who asked a question about resiliency before, just said, I think about resiliency in this sense. I don't worry about the things I have no control over, just like I don't worry about the fact I don't have wings.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah, that's
pretty good.
Yeah, that's good.
Shane has a somewhat of a broad question, but I'll toss it out there and see what you guys think. And again, to the folks who are watching, we're getting on an hour here, and I'm sure both Tanya and Jennifer have very busy client schedules, so I don't want to take too much of their time. So if you have questions, please put them in now, and we'll try to get them answered, because we don't want to go too long with this. So Shane asks, what are some good ways to deal with a pediatric death, either medical or trauma, in the short term and long term? And he said, if we don't have those options immediately, I think he means if we don't have like standard debriefing kind of stuff right after the incident.
Mm-hmm. I want to give a quick answer to that, because I feel very strongly about teaching people how to do some EMDR techniques on themselves. It's not a huge secret, even though there are some EMDR practitioners out there who like to hold on to their knowledge really tightly. So one of the things that you can do, this is literally a technique that's used in trauma therapy, is to cross your hands across your shoulders so that you're touching opposite shoulders, and tap right, left, kind of hard. Like you can hear me tapping here, kind of hard and about this speed, while you think about the event that just happened. And then after you've done that several times, you want to stop. You want to take a couple of deep breaths. You want to kind of check on yourself and see where you're at, and then do it again several times, like 20 times, and then stop, take stock of where you're at. What EMDR does is it forces both sides of your brain to talk to each other, to communicate with each other. And it helps to process what just happened, so that your brain doesn't just lock it away as this was a terrible, awful that I'm going to bring out later when you're least expecting it and bite you in the butt with it and upset you. It actually keeps your brain from doing that. So that's a simple explanation.
I think, yeah, I love that. And with the acute situation immediately after what is potentially traumatizing situation, being able to kind of debrief in a way, in a safe place with another person who is safe, and speaking about what happened when you are relaxed and calm. So when you start talking about it the next day, or the day of, the next day, the 2 days later, that you work on breathing and mindfulness as you rehearse or talk about the incident, and that you talk about it from safe place to safe place, that you don't interrupt the timeline as much as you can, meaning you were safe in the ambulance on the way to the call, and you rehearse the call all the way through to the end when you were safe again, separate from the outcome of the call. So your brain needs to know that you are okay. That's how you will be able to settle the trauma. As a medic, there's a whole, or any medical professional, there's a whole lot of things that happen during the call that can be validated for you, that you did everything right and everything that you could. And that's important. And so debriefing with someone that can help you see all the steps you took to do everything you could, that's very important. But it is crucial that you start in a safe place and end in a safe place when you share the timeline of the story. And Tanya's technique of the bilateral stimulation can definitely help with that process. I mean, yeah. So.
Awesome. So I want to just pause for a second and see if you guys have just a few more minutes to spend with us, or whether you guys need to hop off because it is 4 o'clock.
I'm going to need to hop off. So
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a few minutes, but I need to hop off as well.
Okay. So then I'm going to sort of filter these last couple of questions here. And again, if anybody has anything that's really burning in their mind, please put it up now. And we'll try to get some input. But
thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Tanya. Appreciate it. Here's one that's maybe you could help us with for a second, Jennifer, which is if somebody's really suffering from the anxiety related to this whole thing, that I think we're all feeling, but if somebody feels like they're particularly suffering from that, should they be worried or concerned that that's a sign of underlying depression?
Two different words there. If you're having anxiety, could it be depression? Is that what you asked?
Yeah. So he says, if somebody is really suffering from this anxiety, is that a symptom of underlying depression?
Technically, they are two different things. So just because you have anxiety, it doesn't likely mean you have underlying depression. What people should be evaluating is their mental health history. If you have a history of depression, situations like this can bring on another episode of depression. If you have a history of anxiety, situations like this could bring on a new episode of anxiety. What I think is kind of the reverse of that is also very common is if you have a long history of untreated anxiety, it can look like depression. Okay, so
that makes sense.
Yeah, so my opinion is you typically don't have depression that looks like anxiety, but you could have anxiety or post-traumatic stress disorder, to be more specific, that's been untreated that then looks like depression.
Okay. Well, this was really, really fantastic. And I can't say thank you enough to both you and Tanya for spending the hour with us. I know folks have more questions, and maybe we can prevail upon you to join us again in a couple of weeks or months when we're hopefully further along this. I want to point out to everybody, as Jasmine mentioned, there is an entire mental health resource located on Target Solutions where you can find numbers to call and people to contact, and information about stress first aid and all sorts of other stuff there if you're worried about yourself or somebody else. I want to also highlight the same thing that I talk about on day one of orientation, which is that this particular job has a risk associated with it from a mental health standpoint, no different than a risk from a needle stick or wrecking your truck. And I hope all of us think very concretely about what steps we individually take to know what our coping strategies are and to know what our protective things that we do to protect ourselves from that risk. If you are struggling and you need help, please, please, please reach out. You are not the only one that's feeling that way. I guarantee you. We will rally around you and try to get you whatever it is you need to deal with what you're experiencing. If you know somebody who is struggling, please don't let it go. It's the old, if you see something, say something. Please bring that to that person's attention if it's somebody you're close with, to their friend's attention if you're not the person that's that close, to a supervisor or to me or to whomever, but please don't let it go. Please make sure that you speak up if you see somebody who's struggling so that we can try and help them. And I guess with that, I'll ask Jennifer if she has any closing comments or advice for all of us.
No, I think I appreciate you guys having me on today, and I appreciate all the hard work of everyone out in the field. It is really appreciated. And we know you guys are struggling, and just take care of yourselves.
Thank you very much for being here and all your support
Yeah.
to our clinicians and everyone in our system.
Of course.
Jasmine, any last comments or anything?
No, I think we covered some really good stuff here, and there's some really good tools that were mentioned here. And just, I want to make sure, just like you said, people know that we have the resources available on Target Solutions, and reach out. There is peer support around you, and we have many resources. So if you need anything, we're all here.
Okay. Again, I just want to say thank you to everybody for staying the course here. It is not easy, and you're doing just amazing work. I want to tell you that everybody around the county, all the way through the county administration, your cities, the general folks out there in the community have noticed it and have said so to me. So thank you all very, very much. It's been really spectacular. All right, stay safe.
Thanks.
Thank you for being here. Thanks everybody for tuning in.